Welcome and thank you for watching this video. This video has been prepared for HR employees and we are going to discuss about HR analytics and how you can master time calculations using Power Query. So if you are working for the HR department of a big company, you may be required to generate complex calculations, for example, what is the average time worked for each employee or what is the overtime that the company has to pay. In this case, you may be tempted to use Microsoft Excel because it's a free software that every HR employee knows how to use. However, as we are going to show through the following example, this is not the optimal solution. So, as HR employees, we have data about the time an employee checks in and checks out from the company. And if we want to calculate the hours worked each day, we make the following subtractions. And here are the calculations produced. Everything good so far. However, if we want to calculate the sum of hours worked or the average time worked each month, we may want to generate a pivot table. So here is the pivot table. The values of the pivot table is the sum of hours worked. And the labels of the rows are the months. So according to the pivot table, the employee has worked 9.03 hours for the month of January. However, as we can see on the bottom right edge of the screen, this is not true because the employee has worked 216 hours. So what's going wrong? The pivot table translates the hours worked into days, so in reality the employee has worked 9 days if we add the hours worked each day for the month of January. However, this is actually a piece of information that we do not need, so what's the optimal solution? So we can import this data to Power Query, checking data from table range. And here the data is imported into Power Query. The first step we have to do is to change the format of the column. So the first column is date. The second and the third column is time. I don't want the fourth column. And so if we want to calculate the hours worked, I select the check-in time column and the check-out column, check add column, time, and subtract. So here are the hours worked. And I want to change the format of the fourth column into duration and total hours. So if we load this data as a pivot table, I have the results I want. Another important piece of information you may need, especially if you want to calculate the overtime that the company has to pay, is the weekday number. In this case, you have to use the weekday function of Microsoft Excel. So, for each date, here are the weekdays. Here are the weekday numbers. An important feature of Microsoft Excel is that the weekdays start from Sunday. So, if we copy this column and change its format to weekday name, we can see that the weekday with number 2 is Monday, with 3 is Tuesday, 4 is Wednesday, 5 Thursday, and 6 Friday. So if we want to estimate the overtime worked by the employee, you may have to consider that the standard hours worked for each weekday may be different. For example, from Monday to Thursday, the employees may have to work 9 hours, and because Friday is, for many companies, a casual Friday, they ask from their employees to work 8 or less hours. So the standard hours worked are on this column. And if you want to have a more clean picture, you may have to use the if function. So if the weekday is Friday, is the weekday with number 6, then the standard hours worked is 8. Otherwise, it's 9. I forgot to insert commas among the arguments. And here are the outputs. So, if we want to estimate the overtime worked, we subtract standard hours worked from the total hours worked. It's a piece of cake. However, Microsoft Excel does not give any results for days when the employee left some minutes before the end of the standard hours that has to work. For example, here he left 5 minutes earlier, and Excel gives no results for his overtime because he worked no overtime. So if you think that this process is a bit complex, you may have to use Power Query. However, as you can see, things are much easier if you use Power Query. So if we select the column of dates and add column date, day, day of week, here we have the column with the numbers of the weekday. However, an important feature here of Power Query is that for Power Query, Monday has the number of 1, whereas in Microsoft Excel, Sunday has the number of 1. So here, if we add the column with the name of the weekday, we can confirm that Monday is 1, Tuesday is 2, etc. Let's delete this column because we do not need it anymore. And so if we want to have a more clean picture of the standard hours worked for each work day, we can add a conditional column, standard hours worked is its label. So if the day of week equals 5, because Friday here has the number of 5 and not 6, as happens in Microsoft Excel, then the standard hours worked is equal to 8. Otherwise, the standard hours worked are 9. Let's make a correction here because we have time. So 8 hours and 0 minutes, and 9 hours and 0 minutes if the day is not Friday. So here we are. Here we have hours. And if we subtract these columns, we can have overtime. As you can see right here, Power Query does not have any problem with negative numbers. And this is overtime in hours. And of course, I do not need the numbers that are negative because I have overtime. So I can filter them out. And of course, now I can import the results in Microsoft Excel. And now I can have a picture of the overtime in hours worked each month. In the outputs of Microsoft Excel, if I ignore the negative numbers, I have exactly the same results as I can see on the right bottom edge of the screen. 23 hours and 1 minute for the month of January. Thank you very much for watching.